Right, so we're back now with the the primer on the Lightning dry, which has allowed me to spot any issues that need to address. As ever, when you prime a model that's you know, a limited run, there are a few areas that need addressing. I'll just run through those quickly with you. First thing I noticed when I primed it, and this is the kind of thing that you can miss, I'd forgotten to rescribe the lower side of the tail plane where I'd filled and sanded it, so that needs addressing. There's some very slight, shall we say, mismatch or unevenness here where I've sanded the inner side of the booms here. That's just going to be a very small sanding job that I don't see taking more than a few seconds to address. We've got a couple of small holes where filler hasn't taken the way it should. We've got one on the side of the boom here, and there's another one on the leading edge of the wing, the port outer wing here, that I didn't spot earlier in the construction. I'm really happy to say that the area that required the major filling and rescribing, the fuselage in front of the canopy here and here, a coat of primer has shown that that's been dealt with really nicely. There are no issues there at all, and otherwise it's just there's some other panel detail that needs to be rescribed, such as along the bottom of the cowlings here. And there's also there's a pair of small air intakes on the Lightning's cowlings here and here on both of them. I keep looking at those and thinking I must drill those out, so I really must get around to drilling those out. And I also want to drill out the holes here and here on each side, just for the exhaust pipes. So what I want to do first is just deal with the areas that that need filling. As I say, there's only a couple of areas that the priming has highlighted to me, which is not a bad average really. Usually there's quite a bit more, which shows that to my mind at least it's basically a sound kit. So I'm just going to use a few drops of super glue with a little bit of talc. Again, this is as much to highlight to me where I'm filling and sanding as it is to affect the performance of the filler in any way. So, as I said, there's a tiny little gap. There's a little gap here on the side of the boom where the boom joined to the wing parts. So, as you can see, that's how small that is. And also there's a small problem, shall we say, a hole on the leading edge of the wing, which I've really actually got to catch the light to see, but it's just along there, so a little bit more filler along the leading edge of the wing there. And that's that pretty much dealt with. I'm just checking over to make sure there's nothing else that I've missed. Oh, there's a couple of little bits down the trailing edge of the inner wing, just on the inboard here, that I just want to add some super glue to and fill where there's some slight unevenness, which is done now. So as I say, you've got those very few areas that needed filling: the boom, the wing leading edge, and the trailing edge of the wing on the underside inner wing. I'm just going to run some along the entire thing there. So in a couple of minutes that'll be dry, and we can look at starting to sand and then repriming those areas just to check our progress. Now whilst they're drying, what I'm going to do is look at assembling the props and spinners. So let's just bring you in a little bit for that. So all we've got are these spinners here. Look. What I'll do is I'm just going to assemble those to do the spinner back plates here, line them up, and then we can leave them to dry for a day or two. So I'm just looking around for my liquid poly. There it is. Okay, so all I'm going to do for these is just run some glue along there. Okay. Again, the actual fit is really nice, so and a very good match. So what I foresee on this, when it's when these are dry, is not much more than a little bit of light sanding before we're ready to start dealing with the props, or getting the props glued into place themselves. I must say, and I've said it a couple of times, although this is a limited run model and it's clearly required quite some work on some areas that I've covered with you, overall I've been very pleasantly surprised with the model and how it's gone together. Nothing that any reasonably competent modeler isn't going to be able to handle. So there's the props, or the spinners I should say, glued together. So we'll put them out of the way now and leave them. I'm just going to bring you. See, this is the little things you can do on your model if you plan ahead while you're waiting for little bits to dry, such as the glue here, which I've used as a filler, which is now dry and ready to sand. So it just filled in that couple of minutes nicely while we were waiting for that to dry. So that's that. So that's that little bit sanded and polished out, which shows you just how what minor jobs these were to do really. So I'll just deal with the leading edge of the wing. Now what I plan to do afterwards is I will go back and reprime these areas just to check them, just to make sure that the job I've done has been successful. Although I see no reason why it shouldn't be. You can sometimes get caught out with this kind of thing. So there you go. And finally the last area, which was just this this trailing edge of the wing here, which you can see some filler on. So I'll just running that down. And then that goes in there. All these areas ready for repriming. Now the other area I noticed a little bit of unevenness on was the inboard leading edge of the starboard wing here, where there's just some unevenness where I've been sanding. In fact, again, I don't know if you can actually see it, it's that minor on the model, but I'm going to deal with it anyway, and I'm just going to sand and blend that unevenness out. I mean, the likelihood is that nobody would have ever seen this on the finished model, but I know it's there, so it really is the work of a few seconds to sand and polish that out. So there's that done. So, like I say, surprisingly good for a primer coat. That how little needed refilling and sanding. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to reprime those areas, let the primer dry, and then I'm going to go around and rescribe things like the tail planes here, and some minor rescribing that's needed on the engine cowls, and I'll catch back up with you when I've done that. Anyway, I'll just a quick update with where we are with the Lightning. Everything's been sanded and reprimed, and rescribing's been done everywhere where it was needed, around the engine nacelles mainly, and the underside of the tail here, that's also been done. I've drilled out the exhaust holes here and here, and what I've done is I've also painted, finished off painting and added the final details to the interior here. I'm doing this with the canopy closed, so there's not really a great deal of, I'm not a big interior person really. If I can get away with the minimal work on interiors, I will. This one's going to be done with the canopy closed, so I'm happy that I've added some masking tape seat belts and just done a reasonable painting job on the rest of the interior. It's going to look fine under the canopy. Speaking of which, there's the canopy there. It's very nicely moulded, but it wasn't all that clear on the sprue, so I did a bit of polishing, and I've also given it a bath in Alclad's Aqua Gloss. I'm not usually, I don't by default dip my canopies in any of the clear solutions. I don't, quite often I don't like the effect it gives. I'd rather stick to polishing and that kind of thing to make my canopies clearer. However, on this one it seemed that it wasn't really, the polishing wasn't getting the results, so I decided to try a dip, and it has worked fairly well in making the canopy a fair bit clearer. So I'm also quite happy. The thing with the Aqua Gloss that I also like is it hasn't made it the canopy super shiny, which I sometimes find looks almost as unrealistic as a cloudy canopy to me. So anyway, with that done, I'm just checking. There appears to be a tiny bubble. Which I think I can live with. Anyway, so a test fit of the canopy shows that it fits fairly well. Now I like to, if at all possible, I like to use good normal liquid cement to glue my canopies in place. One area that you have to be careful on models is around the combing area. Around the combing area, sort of here, to make sure that no glue runs up inside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use normal liquid cement just on the rear part of the this canopy, sort of around this area here, to get it well glued in place, and then I'll run some other kind of glue up in around the windscreen and combing areas to make sure I don't get liquid cement running up inside. So I'm going to use Mr. Cement S for this particular job. Okay, so holding the canopy in place, Like so, all I'm going to do is touch a brush full of this to the rear, like so, and you can immediately see it, the capillary action starts taking it around. Okay, as I said, be careful that you don't get it running up inside the combing, because that potentially will ruin your canopy. Okay, so there's that there, and I'm just going to add a tiny little bit to the to this portion here, and then it's just a case of holding it in place for a few seconds till the glue starts to grip. Really a very nice fit. I'm very pleasantly surprised with the fit of this canopy. So anyway, that's the canopy more or less in place. Now the windscreen, I can see a few gaps around the windscreen, which I'll be filling. Now fillers you can use anything really. If the fit is good and there's just literally a gap but no you know, no step or anything, you can use stuff like Gator glue, or you know, crystal clear or something like that. You know, the crystal clear, something like that. If the join is a bit worse, you're looking at using some proper fillers. You know, some people use Milliput or something for this kind of job, and quite helpfully, quite recently, a couple of years ago, Milliput released a black Milliput, which is great for this kind of job, because it means it cuts. You're not. All you'll see from the inside is black, which generally is pretty acceptable. If you use one of the white or grey fillers, you can often see a grey line inside the canopy when you filled and sanded, which just looks wrong. Other things you can use are stuff that we've been using already, stuff like the Mr. Surfacer 500. Now normally I would use this and add some paint, black paint to it to darken it down so you don't get those reflections. I've always wanted somebody to release, thought that if this was released in a black it would be fantastic. And then lo and behold, a few months ago, G&OT's released some Surfacer in black, so I've just got a bottle of this. Potentially it's the perfect solution for this kind of canopy filling. So I'm going to be using that around the canopy area, and certainly around the windscreen to fill and blend it in. So we'll see how that goes when I get there. But if you have a look, let's have a look inside the. And it's pretty much like sort of Mr. Surfacer, somewhere between 500 and 1000, so really quite nice. So I'm just going to select a small fine brush, that'll do the job, and hopefully you can, and I'm just going to try some of this Mr. Surfacer 500, it's really quite thin. So this is the black G&OT Surfacer, and I can see a few applications being required, but I'm pretty happy with how that's going on, I have to say. And it's thick enough not to run up inside the canopy and get between the combing and the clear parts inside, which is exactly what we want. So I hope you can see where I've just added that. I have to say, on an initial test just for that piece, as I say, it's forming a skin quite quickly, so I can add more over it. So we'll see how that dries, but I have to say my first impressions are that Ghia have pretty much scored a home run with this. Absolutely loving it. So there you go, we'll let that dry, see how we're going, and we might have to add another coat or two of that to it, but overall very happy with how that's looking. So there we go, we're getting ever closer to the stage where we can start painting this, so I'll see you then when we've covered the masking of the canopy and hopefully starting to add some paint.